So, first, Adam, it is spring in Ohio, and you live in a number of different places. I mentioned Minnesota, but you've lived several different places. How does spring in the other places you've lived compare to spring in Ohio, and what's been your favorite and least favorite part of spring so far, now that you're back in the Buckeye State?
This is my softball question, by the way.
You guys know.
And it gets a little harder after this, I'm afraid. Well, spring comes a lot earlier here than it does where I've spent most of my life, which is in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so it's to see the trees budding and the flowers popping out of the ground so early in the season. For where I'm from, it would be a month from now, what you see coming out of the ground and the trees budding. So earlier spring. So as we like to say in the land of the Badgers and the Gophers, that we have two seasons. So we have a very short, very hot, humid summer and a very long, cold winter. Oh, wait. No, actually there's 3 seasons in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and that is mosquito season. Has anybody ever been to Wisconsin or Minnesota during mosquito season? Yeah, ish. So I don't think mosquitoes are as bad here. I hope they're not. And so I'm looking forward to the hot, long summers in Ohio.
That include the Ohio State Fair.
Yeah, I do remember being very hot here during the fair. I remember one time, it was one night during the fair. I worked at the Ohio State Fair from '94 until '98. And one night during the fair, I am not kidding you, this is back when I don't think we had cell phones, and so we were tracking the weather somehow, some way. And it was about 10 o'clock at night, and it was 97 degrees. We checked the temperature again about an hour later, and it was 99 degrees. It was getting hotter as the evening went on. So I'm looking forward to that. I really am.
So we've touched on it just very, very briefly, but could you share with folks your background? I'm sure they want to know what all you've done and what led to you arriving here in Ohio for the Ohio State Fair position.
So I'm strange in a lot of ways. One way I'm very strange is I actually grew up on a fairgrounds in Minnesota, the Minnesota State Fair. My dad was the CEO of the fair, and so I literally grew up on the fairgrounds. And Virgil Strickler would sort of challenge me. I grew up on the fairgrounds too. I said, did you have a bed on the fairgrounds? He'd say, no, I would sleep with my cow. I said, well, I lived on the fairgrounds in a house in a bed. So from that great experience, I did pretty much everything you can imagine growing up on the fairgrounds from a job perspective. I loved the industry so much, went away to college in Georgia, and I actually have a sort of a minor, if you will, in exposition and fair management through their hospitality program at Georgia State University. And I had a couple opportunities to explore management early on in my career. Has anybody here ever been to the Calgary Stampede in Calgary, Canada? I worked at the Calgary Stampede for a summer as an intern. It is an incredible event. That's all I can say. And then I worked at 2 California fairs for a brief period of time in a management training program. And then I got tapped to come work here at the Ohio Expo Center State Fair in '94. And left here after 4 years and have had this kind of career working at major fairs. And I worked at the world's largest music festival in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I've also worked for a convention bureau on the venue side, and I came here from Madison, Wisconsin, where I was running an event center that hosts World Dairy Expo. So I've had sort of this life of big event production and then big venue management.
So I want to jump back to one of your comments. You grew up on a fairgrounds. Now I just think about me growing up with my brother. Some of you know some of the other Reese boys. If we grew up on a fairgrounds, I just can't even imagine what we would do and what we would get into. How'd that go for you?
I do have a few of my bosses in the audience, but that would be a whole other session unto itself. It was the police chief of St. Paul told my dad once, it's the most incredible place for your kids to have a party as long as they don't climb the silos. So that might tell you what happened the weekend before the police chief called my dad. So we raised tractors, we climbed silos, we got into all kinds of trouble. So that's, again, a story for another day, but it was the most incredible playground you can ever imagine. And it was like growing up on a farm, but I didn't have to dig in the soil. I just got to play around.
So what unique experiences did you have that helped prepare you for the unique challenges that you're going to be facing here in Columbus at the Ohio State Fair and Expo Center?
You know, I won't say there's any one unique kind of experience I've had in my career. The thing I would say is this. I guess if there's anything kind of unique about where I am right now is going back to, I guess, my upbringing, which was growing up on the fairgrounds. I remember my first job was parking cars for a Billy Graham revival. I'm a 7-year-old with a flashlight helping the crew park cars. And so through that journey of doing everything you can imagine on the fairgrounds, every kind of job imaginable, you know, it instilled in me this love and affection for agricultural fairs. And so that's what I've pursued in my career from the age of 7. I remember working all night one night. I worked 28 hours straight. I sold concert t-shirts in the evening. I turned around the racetrack. It was a motorsports, a half-mile racetrack in the fairgrounds. Turned that over all night, worked all night, and then I was on the racetrack safety crew the entire day. So I think those are, you know, maybe it's not a unique experience, but unique experiences. And then, you know, sort of get into my career mode then, you know, I've done everything from start up an events department, division, if you will, at the Wisconsin State Fair. I created one of it's a pretty rare thing in the country. There's only about 4 fairs that do it. It's called a self-performed mobile amusement area. It's a carnival that we produced in-house at the Wisconsin State Fair. And so I was a part of that. You know, I ran a sales department at a major convention center, always made our goals, exceeded our goals. And so I would say, you know, my experience is pretty well-rounded. I wouldn't say there's anything that I would pick out to say, that's a really unique experience you had, Adam. I guess it just, if anything, you know, I was born and raised into this business, and I've just continued on, and I've had some really cool experiences working for some great leaders and some great staff members, and that's what I'm really fond of.
What is the pay scale for a 7-year-old director per traffic at a Billy Graham revival?
Okay, get this. So I was so into it. Every morning I would get on my bike. I had a Schwinn bike with a banana seat and a big, I don't know if I could say it, but it was called a sissy bar. It was a big bar on the back of my Schwinn, and I would go down 2 blocks to the service building where the grounds crew was, the maintenance crew, and I would work with them all summer long. And do you remember back in the day where people actually got paid every Friday at noon? They would get a gift, you know, this is so far into the younger generation, but the grounds crew would go through a line and everyone was given an envelope. And in that envelope, they got a paycheck. Well, guess what I got in my envelope? A $1 bill. So I made $1 a week as a 7-year-old working on the grounds crew. How's that?
That was the 80s.
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, it was the 80s, right? There wasn't any child labor laws back then either. But it was a fun experience. I rode on a lot of forklifts and held a lot of flashlights as a 7-year-old on the grounds crew. It was really helpful.
So now, growing up on the fair, you got to see exhibitors show their livestock and do that. Did you show any livestock? Did you have that opportunity, or were you so busy directing traffic and doing all those other fair things you didn't get to do that? How'd that work for your experience growing up?
Yeah, I wish I could say I did show livestock. I've been around, obviously, at the fairgrounds, a livestock exhibit during the fair. And then that fair would, like our fair does here, host a lot of livestock and horse shows throughout the year. So I was immersed in that, was surrounding me. And then, of course, adjacent to the Minnesota State Fairgrounds is the University of Minnesota Ag School and their large vet program. So there's actually test fields and areas where cattle roamed right a block from my house. So I certainly was surrounded by it my entire life and my entire career, but no, I've never had the privilege of showing an animal. before. Anybody want to teach me?
Dean's Charity Steer Show, right?
I'm teachable. I'm teachable.
I think we can work on that. Okay. There's people. We know people.
Okay.
We'll get it figured out.
Thank you.
So what was your first connection and contact and experience with the Ohio State Fair?
It was, again, I mentioned I started working originally here in 1994, and I think you were going to ask me, how did I get the job? Well, it was posted, and I applied and interviewed, and I got the job. And I had, just through college experience at the Minnesota State Fair with the concessions department, working with the commercial exhibitors. And so because of that experience, I got hired into the rental office at the State Fair here back in 1994. So that's as simple as that. I applied for the job, interviewed, and I got it. And worked with Mr. Mark List way back in the day as Assistant Director of Ag for Fred Daly. So it's good to see you again.
Now, many people in this room and many people across the state really are very passionate about the Ohio State Fair and are very invested in many different ways. A lot of different stakeholders in this organization. So there's a lot of benefits to that, but there's also a lot of challenges to that. You got to sort of keep everybody happy and let everybody play their roles and so forth. So it can be a positive, but it also can be a challenge. How do you plan on addressing and harnessing those benefits and addressing those challenges?
Yeah, the more people vested in the fair, the better. We could use about 1 million more. We have the capacity. So, that's such a great question. And I've thought a lot
Thanks.
about it.
I thought about it.
On to the next, right? But, our job is to listen to what the fairgoers want, and it's to listen to the message that people in this room want to communicate to the public, right? To the consumer. What is it you want to communicate and get across to the consumer, which is the fairgoer? And that is our job. Yeah, one person might be suggesting one thing, another might be suggesting the other, it might conflict. Hey, and at times, we just had to write a letter to somebody from an organization that wants to self-direct sort of this, this entry process or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But, we have to temper that because our ultimate job is to be the voice of what you want to be said. And so you're writing the script and we're telling the story. And it's as simple as that. So the more you tell us what you want to have said, the more we're going to listen and try to communicate that to our audience.
So as you look at the fair, big picture, there's the junior livestock program, there's exhibitors, there's vendors, there's rides, there's all the food. There's all these components that are very divergent in many ways, but that all have to work together in one event. Number one, how do you manage all that? And number two, do you have a soft spot for any one of those areas over any of the others, or are you going to be political and say you like them all the same?
Well, the fair has so many different elements, as you all know. There's so many layers. And I would say this, and this is not a political thing, but first of all, we have to look out for the welfare of the attendees, right? The safety and the well-being of the people attending our event. That's first and foremost. Secondly, our job, again, is to present agriculture in an interesting, effective, educational manner. That's our charge. That's our mission. And so, it's historically fairs for 250 years have been doing the same thing that we're doing. And every year you have to bring a new twist, another turn to it. And so is there something that takes priority over the other? No, agriculture takes priority for us. And the other elements that are produced within the fair, the entertainment, the carnival, the food, the beverage, that's all just part of the celebration of ag and urban brought into one event. So, there are many elements to the fair. They're all very important, and they're dynamic, right? Because carnivals change, and so do food concessions and the spending habits of people. Now there's beer sold on the fairgrounds, which makes it a more social environment, which is good for all of us because people will stay in longer and enjoy their time at the fair. So I think the analogy I like to use is, has anybody ever bussed dishes before or served water in a restaurant, right? And when I was in college, I had a job in a nice restaurant, and I was a water server, serving water. And you have all these water glasses on a tray, and you have to fill them all about to the same height, because if you don't, it's going to throw your balance off. And if you don't place them all directly on the tray the way they should be placed for when you take them off, you stay in balance, then you're going to have an issue. So what I learned the first time I ever served water, because no one taught me how, they just said, pour a bunch of glasses, take it on a tray, put it over your head, and then take one glass off at a time to place it at someone's place. Well, I did that for the first time and the last time, because I didn't take things off of the tray properly. So, and the whole tray dumped on someone's lap. And I think that's sort of the analogy. I didn't stick with that job very long serving water. It was better in the kitchen cleaning pots and pans. But my point is that everything has a balance to it, right? And if you take too much off of one side, you're going to dump the whole tray. And that's sort of, in our industry, what we try to do is have a good balance of all those things on our property to present to our audience.
I did not hear a favorite in there at all. That was very political.
Yeah, well, that was smart on my part, right? Because I'm sure you'll find another question there you're going to ask me that I'll have to, give you an answer to that might not serve everybody properly.
Funny you should say that. Next question. So the state fair has all these broad components, but it's also got a number of different components and segments within agriculture. So you got livestock, you got the people bringing the biggest sunflowers or the various horticulture projects and so forth. So as you look at the different components of Ohio agriculture, which are represented in this room today, do you have any particular interest, any particular background in any of those areas that you'd like to share or highlight? Maybe, again, a soft spot or a favorite. And you can pick favorites. I won't tell anybody.
Yeah, having been in this industry for so long, and have been to so many livestock shows and so many fairs, I think what sticks with me the most. It's not one particular breed, one particular show, one particular anything, except this image that's in my brain, and that image is a youth, a junior exhibitor, walking their animal into the Coliseum or the arena, nervously showing their animal in front of a crowd, being judged, and nervously accepting an award, a ribbon, right? And seeing the excitement on their face and the joy in their eyes, and maybe recognizing parents or family in the audience. And then that exhibitor, that youth, taking their animal to get their picture taken with the family, that's a lasting memory, right? They're never going to forget that experience in life. That will last forever. And honestly, that's what we do in our business, is bring lasting memories to people, and in that competition, so to speak. So if you were to say, hey, if you want one favorite about any of those things that are elements of agriculture at a fair, that would be it.
Well, that's a good one.
It's true. It rings true every time you get a group of kids showing their animals at the fair. That's what we're all aiming for.
So we had a delicious meal today, and everybody here understands, at least components of how that meal came to be, from agriculture through the food chain and so forth. But we have a growing disconnect in this country, in Ohio and around the country, between people who produce the food and the people who consume it. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. There's a lot of gap, I guess, in the agricultural food chain understanding for a lot of folks. The Ohio State Fair is a great venue to make a connection between agriculture and some of these folks that maybe don't understand agriculture so well. How do you see that role changing, and what are some things that the Ohio State Fair can do in working with all its various stakeholders to help address the growing consumer gap between agriculture and the final meal that they enjoy every day?
Well, when we were, 98% agrarian 100 plus years ago, you didn't need to teach, explain, demonstrate to the audience at the fair what agriculture was, right? Because they lived it. 98% of the people did. And now, of course, it's flip-flopped. It's probably more like 99.1%. And so, from the fair standpoint, is our job is to present all of agriculture, whether it's production or even urban farming. And so the story we want to tell is very positive, no matter, again, if it's large production or if it's someone growing, trees in their backyard. That is our job, is to provide that forum for you all, to our audience, to explain the benefits, because agriculture has changed so much. It changes every day. Now we're so technology based in the industry. There's so much that goes into technology that it's always changing. And I think fairs have done a good job over the centuries to sort of morph and show that change and the benefits of the different types of production of agriculture. So again, we're just reacting to what you all are producing, and again, the messaging you want to have spoken to our audience.
So I'm guessing if I polled everybody in this room and asked them if they like or don't like the butter cow, everybody's going to say, oh, I love the butter cow. Everybody loves the butter cow. And that's been a long time staple at the Ohio State Fair. In other venues you've been at, is there something similar along that level? And what are they? And why are those kind of things, those draws, those unique components to what we're doing, why are those kind of things important?
I'll answer that in 1 second. One thing I didn't mention, though, for the last question, I think is really important to know for you all, is there's two things that we do in particular that speak to production agriculture, and I think it's two things that we do well. One is the birthing center, and then the other would be the little hands, the little farmers. And so that's our attempt to connect the youth in particular to agriculture. And I don't think, a 5-year-old is concerned about, massive production of agriculture compared to a backyard farm or backyard garden. But I think that it's some of our effort to connect our audience to agriculture. So with that said, let's go back to your question. The butter sculpture. I hate to tell you this, but there are many fairs that do butter sculptures. And I've seen many of them. I'll list a few. Don't laugh at me here. I think the year I went to the Iowa State Fair, they do like a different exhibit with their different sort of sculptures every year themed. Some of them are a little goofy. I think the year I went, it was a John Deere tractor butter sculpture, and they still do a cow, but they did a lot of elements in regard to using butter as a means by which to sculpt. But New York State Fair, Minnesota State Fair, they do the busts of all of the queens, the 10 queens, and they have someone in a cold room with the queen, and they sit and sculpt her in front of an audience, and so then they put it on display the rest of the fair. So a lot of fairs do, not a lot, but I would say about a dozen fairs that I'm aware of that do butter sculptures. None as well as we do ourselves. Amen, right, brother? But so ours is pretty special. Other fairs do unique things. All fairs are unique to their communities, they're unique to their state, right? I mean, so that's what's fun about going to a different fair. When people say to me, hey, how does the Wisconsin State Fair compare to the Ohio State Fair compared to the Washington State Fair, as an example? You can't compare. They all have the same sort of elements, but the emphasis and the uniqueness of each element of those events is a little bit different. In particular in agriculture, right? You go out to the California Fair where I worked in the 90s, you wouldn't find cattle anywhere. It's all small animals. You can't transport cattle to, Del Mar, California, as an example. So, they've had to sort of morph and change the animals and the breeds that they present because of the fact of transportation and what what's out in California in particular. But some of the cool things we have besides the butter sculpture, don't lose track of Smokey the Bear. I remember when my daughter was 3 years old and taking her out to Smokey, and she still is confused as a 30-year-old understanding how Smokey knows her name, right? So I think Smokey is pretty unique, and you don't find that at any other fair. You might find the butter sculptures, but you're not going to find Smokey in my travels in any other fair. Texas has Big Tex, this giant, Texan with a cowboy hat on, and he says, howdy, folks, and, does a little bit of this, and you're like, oh, okay. But he doesn't know my name like Smokey does, right? Like, that's not cool. Anybody here ever been to the Big E in Eastern States, Massachusetts? What a cool fair. And what's cool about that fair is they have what's called the Avenue of the States. And all of the state capitals from the 5 New England states are exhibit halls. So out front will be the reproduction of the capital of Vermont, New Hampshire, Delaware, Massachusetts, Maine. Am I forgetting one? Okay, so you go into the Maine exhibition, you go into the capital of Maine, you walk in, and what do you get? A baked potato. So that's kind of unique, I guess, from a fair standpoint. But I think we got 2 unique, really cool things happening. And I think that's part of what my table is telling me I need to do is bring cheese curds because I love cheese curds. But I think there's other things iconically that we could either develop or bring out of what we already produce at the fair. And that's where my thinking, my radar is always perked up about what else can we sort of promote and make something extra special about the fair. So this is where you all come into play. You have to stop by and see me after this session and say, hey, Adam, not the other 2 Adams, but this Adam, but come up to me and say, hey, I think you should do this at the fair. Because that's what I've been doing. I've been in the job 7 weeks, right? I've never signed a bill for $247 million before. And that was after I did the wine tasting at ODA with Director Baldridge. So I felt very comfortable signing a $247 million bill for the contractor. But please, this is going to be kind of my end note to you all is I am interested to learn what you all would like to see stay at the fair, be jettisoned at the fair, or enhanced or built upon at the fair. So please do share your thoughts and feelings with me about ways forward for us to improve our exposition.
I want to be the first to put in another vote for the cheese curds. I'm a guy who likes.
Okay, you got it. I know some people.
Yeah. So there's a really strong junior program here with junior exhibitors showing all kinds of livestock at the county fairs, and then of course the pinnacle of that is the state fair. How do you see the strength of that program moving forward, and what can we be doing in this room to help you facilitate the future of a strong junior fair program in Ohio, because it's so important to so many folks?
Keep doing what you're doing. I think what Virgil started with the Youth Reserve Program is such a great, unique launch pad for us. I mean, it is so established and so well embraced, and it's embraced and supported by many of you in this room. Thank you so very much for contributing, bidding, supporting, sponsoring. So we've got the sponsorship of corporations and individuals. We certainly have the commodity groups backing us. So one thing I've learned in this career, not many things, but one thing I learned is the importance of youth. When I was out in California, we gave everyone a ribbon, all the kids. And I scratched my head, why are we giving ribbons out? Because you know what? That child will take that ribbon, whether they just did some art project at the fair and they want a ribbon, or they were an exhibitor, they want a ribbon, they took it home, they'll remember the fair forever because they want a ribbon. And so that participation grows participation. And once we start, I'd say putting the hooks in the child, once they've participated in the fair, once they've gotten a ribbon, once they've been involved through FFA, 4-H, whatever it is, we want them to keep coming back. So I think Virgil's Youth Reserve Program is a great element of what we do that we're going to continue to make special and continue to foster and grow that youth participation, in particular for ag kids at the fair.
And of course, the Ohio State Fair is a huge deal and a large part of your new duties, but there's other big events too, Quarter Horse Conference, Beef Expo, and the list goes on. How do you see, with the changes especially coming up in the facilities, the role of those other events outside the fair in terms of importance, in terms of benefits to Columbus as a community, and in terms of benefits to Ohio?
This is where the fun begins, because our job isn't to just produce a 12-day fair, right? It is to host 200 other events or so, and we know that we have such a community asset. Back in the day when they would develop a fairgrounds, it was for 12 days out of the year. Back then, 5 days out of the year. We can't afford to do that anymore, right? We're open 365, 24/7 for that matter. So I'm a big proponent of using that asset, using that community resource over and over again. So we're so fortunate to have quarter horse. We really are. We're excited, happy to have them show up every year, and after 2 months, happy and excited to have them leave too and prepare for the next event. But we're very fortunate. There's a lot of things playing in our favor. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. Location, the pure asset we have of all the facilities and the grounds and the parking, the location, again, of the fair in relation to not only the city, but the state that surrounds us. So it is such an incredible asset. So my intent, my goal is to use that asset more and more. And lastly, with the construction of new buildings on the grounds, one, the multi-ag complex, the new Ag and Hort building, will have 100,000 square feet of exhibit space. So that just and more meeting rooms. So it just gives us a whole nother realm of opportunity to host even more events on the property. So it's revenue, obviously revenue positive for us, and we need that revenue to continue to fund the operation. And the more we make on events, the less we have to charge to get in for admission or for registering for something at the fair. So it's an economic driver for us, and we'll continue to attract either organically or through marketing efforts to get more events and keep the events that we currently have.
Now, with that in mind, of course, the governor's Expo 2050 plan has been a huge endeavor. A number of people in this room have worked really hard on that. There's a large number of stakeholders that have participated in that. Big deal. What's the current status of that, and what are we going to see, for this year's fair, but then moving forward as the transition takes place for the new facility?
Yeah, great question. Wow. Has anybody been on the grounds lately, like in the past week? Okay. The whole place is a construction site. That's all I can say. Every day I look out my window and there's a parade of dump trucks. So what's happened so far is starting south and working north. Just a quick 30-second synopsis of what's going on. Infrastructure changes. So we're in the ground going from the south end, working our way north. So everything from sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and telecommunications, which is fiber optics, what else? Water, electric is all being changed out. So you've got that going on. You've got some work around the Cox Fine Arts building. Sorry to say, the Ohio building, the old commodity building is down. It's flat. Made a big sound when it all fell down at once. So that building is destructed, razed, gone. It's just a dirt floor right now. The old Buckeye building on the west side of the property, that has been demolished. And right now about 80% of the Ag Corp building is down. And so you've got demolition work. And then next month, you'll start seeing footings going in to new Ag complex, which is over on the west end of the property. And then, of course, the showplace building in the center of the grounds. The footings will start coming out of the ground starting in May. So a lot happening. So construction will begin in May. So what does that mean for the fair? Well, it means our good friends, the Commodities, have kindly have agreed to move across campus, and they're in one of the north commercial buildings, the old open air barns, and they're going to operate out of there with a beer garden, some entertainment, and some ag and hort displays in that same space. So a little bit displacement there for 2 years. So thank you for everyone that made that flop for us, that change for 2 years. And you'll see some construction fencing in the center of the grounds where the old Ohio building was. That'll be there for 2 years as they construct. And then some more construction fencing on the west end of the grounds where the ag complex is being built. Now, where the ag and hort building is in the center of the grounds, that will have temporary asphalt. There'll be a truck compound, and then surrounding that will be concessions for the next 2 years. So a lot of that happening in conjunction with that. We're building a new gate, which will start in November, a new cardinal gate up on the north end. So that'll be reconstructed. And so we've got great drawings, a really good plan for that. The old solar home, which most people don't know it exists, will become first aid. And I don't know, I'm probably forgetting something, 2 or 3 things along the lines, but it's a massive project. And typically a construction company, they call them shells, which is a project. They typically work on one shell or one project. We have 7 individual projects taking place on the campus. Happy to take anybody on a tour. You're going to just see a bunch of open spaces right now, but what's going to come out of the ground is incredible. And as I mentioned at the table, it's one of the things that drew me here is there's not too many fairs in this country putting about 400 plus million into their infrastructure. So that's one of the many reasons I was drawn here is the opportunity to rebuild the campus. And beyond that, as you know, it's not just about buildings, it's landscaping, it's streetscaping. Just, the governor has had an incredible vision for the future of the fair, and the way it plays out will be spectacular. So I think come 2026, it's all going to be done by 2026. When you come on out, you're going to see something spectacular.
So you mentioned 2026, but we've got a couple fairs between now and then. How are you going to manage this with the active construction site, but also some huge events going on? How are you going to balance it?
Yeah, so during the fair in particular, you're going to see some scrim fencing. This is so unique to me because every fairgrounds I've worked on, we've been able to do a project that built a multi-purpose dairy building at the Washington State Fair. We had it done 2 days before the fair started, and it took us 10 months to build. So we're used to, in the fair environment, getting something built before the fair. We can't do that. The scope of these projects is way too immense. So what you're going to see, again, are 2 areas in particular that will be fenced off. And we're working around. We've displaced some concessions. We haven't sent them, packing. We've relocated the concessions and anything we've programmed in those areas. I mentioned the dairy, not dairy, but the commodity groups moving. And so we made a great accommodation there for 2 years. So, just moving the bits and pieces around. Our bigger challenge has really been quarter horse, because quarter horse, again, as you know, uses every inch of our property. And so we've had a lot of discussions about how to accommodate that event in particular, but I think we're there. I think we found the formula to appease them for the next 2 years before everything is completed.
Now, I'm a guy who enjoys good fair food. I think most people in here probably do. Rumor has it, a little birdie named Dale Minio told me, you really like ice cream. Dale likes ice cream too. So if you were giving some advice to folks on how to maybe get the most bang for their buck in terms of hitting the fair food, what advice would you have? How do you navigate a place like the State Fair in terms of food?
Okay, this is where I need audience participation. Help me here. I was mentioning at the table, growing up in this business, you believe it or not, I don't really eat a lot of fair food. And it's not that I think it's bad for me or it's not good. I'm working, and one of those things stress for me, I don't eat. Some people eat when they're stressed, but I don't. But the one thing I do is every day I eat ice cream. And during the rest of the year, I'm sorry to say this, I don't really eat a lot of ice cream. But it's my thing that halfway into the day, I said, whoever's around me, let's go. I'm going to buy ice cream. So if you're around me midday, come hit me up. I'll buy you some ice cream. So we go get ice cream. So that's really my focus. So I want to hear from you all. If you were to give me some advice to give other people advice, what do people need to eat at the State Fair that is good and economical? And I know the answer I'm going to get from a few people, but help me out, because I haven't been to the fair here in 25 years. So what do I need to pass on? What is the food item to share? Help me out. Mini donuts, all right. Yeah, that's a meal right there. All right. Is that before you eat the entree or just eat mini donuts? She can have mini donuts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Ah, that's good. I can have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner during the fair. Pig wings, all right. Great. That sounds really delicious. Are they messy? No? Okay. Not messy, but totally worth it. Sounds great. I love that. Any other tips? Who can help me out? Favorite fair food?
Fried Oreos.
Fried Oreos. Wow. Okay. The Oreo producers of Ohio would appreciate to hear that. Wheat. Yes. Okay. There you go. Anybody else? And if you drink beer, and now there's beer at the fair. When I was here 25 years ago, no beer. So if you want to say beer is something you would choose, or Ohio wine, Director Baldridge, go ahead and vote for wine. Okay, Director Baldridge says wine. There you go. Okay, so thanks for the tips. I'll eat Oreos, mini donuts, the wings, and stick with my ice cream too. Thank you.
I do have one more for you. Is there anything, you've got a forum here of folks involved in Ohio agriculture, and is there anything you would like to share with them as you come and start get rolling in here in your new role?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Well, first of all, thank you for everyone's graciousness and kindness in my first 7 weeks, at least, of being here. Everyone is coming up and introducing themselves, congratulating me, welcoming me to Ohio and to the fair, and I really appreciate that. You know, as you all know, if you've changed jobs, transitioned jobs, moved across the country, it's a hard thing. And I get asked, are you settled in yet? Well, no, the answer is no, I'm looking for a house. But, so if you have a room to rent, please let me know. But it makes me feel so good when everybody in this room has been coming up to me and saying, welcome. And that really means a lot, and I really appreciate it. And I have a lot to learn. I really do, even though I've been doing this for a long time. But Ohio is different than Wisconsin, is different than Washington. So I really appreciate just your willingness to come up to me and tell me I made a mistake, I said something stupid, why don't you do this, why don't you learn more about ag? And that's really my goal. I have a propensity, I guess, a background skill set on managing events and in particular livestock and agricultural fairs. But I am by no means an expert at anything. I know a little bit about a lot, but not an expert in one thing in particular. So please do share your wisdom. Someone offered to share a history of the fair with me. I love that. I really, really do. And my goal is to make it a better place. And I can't do that without you all in this room. So please share your thoughts, ideas, and impressions of the fair with me, because I really want to be able to make it a much better place in the future. But thanks again for your graciousness and your welcoming me back to Columbus and the Ohio State Fair and the Expo Center.
Excellent. Can we have a round of applause for that?